Hello,
Tina Marie Tyler.
Oh, yeah, you made it, you made it. Oh, yeah, you made it, you made it.
The best in hip hop and R&B.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio World. Today is the first day of the Black History Month programming, and I'm super excited that Tina Ontek can be a part of it. So welcome. We've got a great show and not a whole lot of time, so I want to get right to it and introduce my first guest to you. Dr. Laura Adderly is the associate professor at Tulane University, and I have to bow down because she is a wealth of knowledge, and she has been an advocate for Black folks and the preservation of Black history for a long time. So please welcome to the show, Dr. Laura Adderly. Dr. Adderly, are you there?
I'm so happy to be here. Now, this is a.
How are you? Hi. How are you?
You know, I like a lot of historians. I love Black History Month, but it's always a little bit frustrating because it goes by so quickly, and we could do this all the time. But it's just. I would say this: what's fantastic about your format and the pandemic is terrible. COVID-19 is horrible, and I wish it would go away. But it's really opened up to people how much more we could be paying attention to on digital platforms.
Right.
And, and younger people have been leading us on this, but it's really, I think, opened up a lot of conversations that took more effort, and people weren't as open to, I've attended more things. And my coworker who works on African history, I joke that Dr. Liz McMahon is like traveling all around the country to every African history seminar and this kind of stuff. So I'm excited to be in this format, and I hope that we remember to keep it and don't, I know everybody's saying, let's go back to normal, but some of this stuff we should really keep because it gives us more opportunities.
Absolutely. Dr. Adderly, tell us a little bit about Tulane University, because you guys have some exciting things going on. And so before we get started, just kind of give us a little bit about your background and let's talk about Tulane. It's a fabulous university there in New Orleans.
Tulane is in some ways we're both, the good thing about COVID-19 in Tulane is that we did this adaptation once before after Katrina. And I said that all of the universities in New Orleans, we've had to adapt to some pretty rough conditions before and not being able to do things the way we wanted to. And Tulane is a relatively wealthy private institution, so we have some resources. But what it was a very Southern institution, very regional institution. And in history, they're always, as long as history's been taught, Tulane, like Harvard Radcliffe, Columbia Barnard, it had a partner women's college that it was a separate college. So, but when they became, after the second half of the 20th century, they were one university. There was always Southern history taught here. And one of my mentors, a woman named Sylvia Fry, who wrote an amazing book called Water from the Rock about Black people who fought in the American Revolution and what kind of freedom they saw, because they weren't on some anti-British kind of freedom journey.
Right.
So there was always Black, well, I shouldn't say, for a long time, there was Black experience. But it's about 25 years ago. It is in the late 60s that Tulane had student activists and others pushing for sort of both the admission of Black students in higher numbers, but also for Black studies. And I tell people that Black studies at Tulane is technically 50 years old, if you look at for when students really asked it. But after Katrina, one of the things that Tulane did that was a little bit different was that they split a lot of schools up, and they said, you can do your creative thing.
Right.
School of Science and Engineering, and we are in a school of liberal arts. And right at the point that that a lot of people in the country were saying, like, we have to be practical, like, what's that kind of humanities stuff for? We had a dean and a leader of our school whose whole job was to remind people of what social sciences and humanities were for. And the first dean of our School of Liberal Arts was Carol Haber, and she retired a couple of years ago, and now we have Dean Brian Edwards. And part of the big thing about what we do in the school is remind people of why you got to have history and art history and the arts and humanities, and you can't have a kind of STEM-centric education. And one of the things we point out all the time at Tulane is that if you count the amount of contact time with students who are trying to get the skills they need to function in the world, they're going to spend a lot of time in our school, no matter what their major is.
Right.
And that is, I think Tulane is perfectly sized. It's about 12,000 students, about 7,000 undergraduates. It is what they call a research institution. So unlike, for example, a community college whose primary purpose is providing education mostly to the local population, Tulane is both a national and international research institution. So they expect us as faculty to be conducting research in our fields. And Tulane really, once the city came back from the Katrina moment, we've had some strong leadership sort of trying to raise more money to make different kinds of research possible. One of the things going on here now that's pretty exciting to me in Black Studies is the School of Public Health, which has always had a pretty big international thing. Dr. Thomas Leveist, who's the dean at our School of Public Health, is really tied into health equities issues. And we've always in Black Studies had a lot of strong ties we have a strong community of faculty in psychology who deal with like issues of resilience and how African descended populations respond to different things. And I tell my students all the time, I said, I can guarantee you very few things. If someone tells you they're going to prepare you and you're going to be sure to have X, Y, and Z job, you have no idea. Technology changes, life changes. But I will guarantee you that you will encounter the United States relationship to Black people in your everyday life. Like, the 1619 Project was a gift, all right? Because, people can, separate from the sort of downright silly and misinformed critiques of it. But one of the nice things about about what Nicole Hannah-Jones and her colleagues accomplished there was that and she did it very deliberately, that we have a gigantic platform to say to people that the coming of Black people in this country, that the whole history of slavery, the making of race and racism, we're either going to deal with this smart, like we're going to deal with it, which is what I tell my students. And you can either deal with it smart or you can just plain old deal with it. And so Tulane is, I think, it's in a sweet spot. And one of the nice things about the city of being in New Orleans is because
besides the foods and the music.
Yeah, the food, the music, the city. This is a place that is, for a lot of its history, was a majority Black city. It's at the mouth of the Mississippi River, so no one needed to teach us about environmentalism. It's in your face.
Right.
We have the Native Americans call this place Bobancha because of the trading. Multiple Native American nations came here as a trading spot. So we're surrounded by this multicultural history. And then because this place was colonized, by French, by Spanish, by English, before it became a part of the United States. It's not like you can be in some parts of the United States and ignore the multicultural, colonial, slavery history of the country. It's pretty hard to do that in New Orleans. You might not talk about it, but it's pretty hard to be in this place and do.
Right. And Dr. Adderly, we're having a little bit of technical issues. So if I could just ask you to do maybe fix your mic a little bit, maybe do a little check, a little test to make sure that your mic is working. And while you're doing that, I would like to bring on my next guest, who is another phenomenal, outstanding woman by the name of Zella Palmer. Miss Zella, are you there?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
How are you?
It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for sharing your son's birthday with us. Please wish him a happy birthday. And I know you can't stay long, so.
Yes, I will. It's such a pleasure to be here with you both. Dr. Adderly, Tina, such a pleasure to be here celebrating Black History Month and being a part of this. Yes.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit. I mean, you just were appointed to the James Beard Foundation. Tell us a little bit about that before we start getting into the things that everybody needs to know about Black History Month.
Sure. So I am the chair and director of the Dillard University Ray Charles program in African American material culture in New Orleans. Dillard University we celebrated our 150th anniversary last year in 2019. So it is one of the liberal arts HBCUs. It has a long legacy, long history in New Orleans and the South, and really in the United States. And I was just appointed to the Black and Indigenous Fund Committee for the James Beard Foundation, where we will be offering grants, $15,000 grants to food and beverage businesses that are owned by Black folks or Indigenous folks. And just wanted to also just recognize the place that we are. Dr. Adderly talked about that, how we are in the Bobancha region that was, native land. So Louisiana is heavily, native. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And, the enslaved folks that were brought here since 1619.
Right. So let me just ask my first question, because we don't have time to go through 10 things, but let's go through at least 5 things that Black folks need to know about Black history. So I wanted to start, first of all, with Dr. Carter Woodson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us a story about maybe how he came about establishing February as Black History Month? What were some of the thoughts behind it? A lot of people say, hey, how come Black folks got the shortest month of the year? Tell me about it. Talk to me about Black History Month being in February.
I'll let Dr. Adderly answer that. Dr. Adderly, are you there?
I think I don't. Are you here? I can't see you, but if you are, I'd love to have your response to it. Oh.
Oops.
Can you hear us? The marvels of technology.
I know. Well, Dr. Carter G. Woodson was part of, what a lot of men in that time were. He was a race man, When you look at W.B. Du Bois, when you look at all of the greats of that time period, they were trying to educate and, celebrate our legacy in this country. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, I know that some people say it was the shortest month, but, you have to consider the time period that we were in, when Black History Month came about, and just, the struggle and the push that we had to make happen in order for us to even acknowledge. And now you look at, a lot of these charter schools and even public schools, they're not teaching anything about African American history. I mean, we're from the generation, I'm sure Tina and Dr. Adderly can agree, where a lot of us remember seeing, on the wall, African American heroes, and our Black teachers constantly drilled in our heads, just the importance of knowing what it means to be Black, and to have Black pride. And so now you look at it, and many students, they have to wait until they get to an HBCU, if they're lucky, or a university, to learn anything about Black history, or they're learning on social media. So, just the simple fact that Carter G. Woodson started Black History Month is evidence to our excellence, and really trying to push the narrative so that we learn about ourselves, because we were taught not to learn anything about ourselves, and that we were subhuman.
Well, I would be remiss having two women as my guests to not talk about the important contributions that African American women have made to Black culture.
Yes.
Dr. Adderly, I know that you're definitely a person that says we need to know more about the Black women that have been a part of the movement. Tell us a little bit about a couple of people that we should know right off the bat, besides the folks that we always talk about, Phyllis Wheatley's, maybe some of the other women that don't have as much shine that we should know about. Can you hear me, Dr. Adderly? Oh, no, looks like we're still having some technical difficulties. That's okay. Zella, what do you think?
I did a lot of research. So, my field is in African American material culture, and that is really just evidence of Black culture, whether it's through the arts, through literature, food, music. And so, our program at Dillard University focuses and highlights on African American material culture. And so one of the, legendary personas in history that doesn't get enough recognition, that I did a lot of research on and wrote a lot about, is Nellie Murray. Nellie Murray, yes.
That's a new name.
A lot of people might have not, Nellie Murray was the queen of Creole cuisine in Louisiana. She was third generation plantation cook, enslaved on Louisiana Governor Hebert's plantation. Now, after the Civil War, she was freed by de facto, but she became the first celebrity chef. Okay, and she.
Wow.
Yes, she moved from Bayou Gullah, Louisiana, to New Orleans, where she launched an empire. You have to think about the Civil War and what was happening after the Civil War, and the reason why many cookbooks came out after the Civil War, because white women who of presses who had means, they had enslaved labor, they have enslaved cooks. So after the Civil War, they had to learn how to cook, So Nellie Murray was able to use everything that she learned, everything that she was forced to learn, I should say, and was able to create an empire where she was the caterer of New Orleans. And she was so famous that in 1894, there was an article written about her in the New Orleans newspaper that we, where it talked about how if you didn't know Nellie Murray, you were a nobody. That she traveled Europe, she went to Paris and Berlin, and
wow.
She was famous. It also talked about how she served Susan B. Anthony at the suffrage movement convention here in New Orleans. She served 1,000 sandwiches to people. I mean, she was just phenomenal. And she was, sent to cook for New York families, families, German families. I mean, she was that famous. And the highlight of her career was when she brought Louisiana Creole cuisine to the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And
wow.
line out the door waiting for her food. And at that same World Fair was where Nancy Green, if you all are familiar with Nancy Green, the face
Yes.
of Aunt Jemima, was
Yes.
there. They launched their products. But at the same one, there was Nellie Murray, who was an entrepreneur. She, died a millionaire. She, gave money to HBCUs. Her children, her grandchildren ended up going to Xavier University and Strait University. And, they even opened up a dental clinic in Liberia. And now today, just to show you the importance of generational wealth, her descendant is the owner of Liberty Bank, which is New Orleans' own Black-owned bank, Alden McDonald.
Oh my gosh.
So there's
Heavens, can y'all hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Dr. Adderly.
Okay. Well, now where the magic happens, because that's my noteboard and it's right by the router. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
One of the things I was gonna say in terms of women, that a name that everybody's heard recently, that there was a lot of the scholarships that were just announced, the Marshall Motley scholarships in fact, people should know about this. And they're for anyone who's applying to law school and is willing to commit to doing 8 years of civil rights work in the South. Mm. And one of the shameful things is that everybody knows Thurgood Marshall's name. Well, almost everybody, in terms of his leadership role in the work of the Legal Defense Fund, not just because he ended up on the Supreme Court. Constance Baker Motley, and one of my besties wrote a book actually about school desegregation. She is central to the Legal Defense Fund's work, to their argumentation, to their leadership. And that is why when the NAACP Legal Defense Fund made these scholarships, they did not call them the Thurgood Marshall scholarships. They called them the Marshall Motley scholarships because it is overdue. Everyone that cares about civil rights in the United States should know Constance Baker Motley's name by heart. And she's not well known. And it's part because of the way that women get marginalized in our popular consciousness. And we want to think of male leaders. The same friend who wrote that book is a woman who teaches at Rutgers named Rachel Devlin. She did a lot of work with Leona Tate and Tessie Prevost, and I'm going to forget someone's name, and Ruby Bridges and the desegregation girls here. But her book is actually, we in New Orleans, we know that it was brave girls that desegregated schools here because they are famous locally. But that happened all over the country. And she opens the book with one of the women she called up to interview. The woman said, "What took you so long?" And she's like, we were out there as girls doing important stuff, and people weren't paying attention. The other name I wanted to throw out, because there's a new documentary that everybody should watch, is Reverend Anna Pauli Murray, who was involved in the founding of the National Organization for Women in terms of gender rights, African American rights, one of the most visionary thinkers, all right, and leaders of both the women's movement, the Black civil rights movement, and she is scarcely known, except if you do gender studies, a set of folks that do African American intellectual history. Later in her life, she became an Episcopal priest, and so I'm a Black Episcopalian. So, like in the church, like there's a day when they say when they uplift her. But Anna Pauli Murray's name should be as well known as any sort of African American leader of the 20th century. I myself, and I'm an immigrant from the Bahamas, and my grandfather, one of the things he used to do was write to African American leaders. All right, and just not people. My grandfather, I'm going to get it wrong. He died in the 50s, so he died before the civil rights movement really took off. But of the people that he wrote to, she was even on that list. Like he was like, who are the important leaders fighting for Black rights in the United States? And Anna Pauli Murray is a name that everyone should know. Zella Palmer and I, one of the things, like in the very Gentilly, right across the street from Dillard, Frances Joseph Gaudet founded an independent Black school. You know, a Black woman today trying to found an independent school, all right, would have a tough road. She went all over the country. She went to Europe. And one of the things about Frances Joseph Gaudet, why she was sort of Michelle Alexander for like the 1910s. She said, you know, I look at these jails and they are just locking up young men, mostly Black, some white. They've done small crimes, theft or things like that. No one should be locked up in a cage for that. Some of them haven't done anything at all. We're locking up all kinds of innocent people and ruining their lives. Why are we doing this? And she said that in 1910. All right. So she was a leading scholar, a popular scholar of mass incarceration before it was cool.
Wow.
All right. You know, and we have a juvenile court system in New Orleans, in part because of activism of Frances Joseph Gaudet. And there's a project here to try to and likewise, like there's in certain circles, people know these names, but, you know, especially there's a huge list of women. And if, you know, every Black History Month, someone should say my project is to find a woman that I have overlooked. You know, there's a book coming out about the women and families connected to the Southampton Rebellion, which we remember as Nat Turner's rebellion all by itself with just nobody. All right. The Dr. Vanessa Holden, who's in Black Studies at University of Kentucky. It's the end of the day, and I'm blanking on the title. It's called Surviving Southampton. Okay. All right. And we need to get more women and families and children in our Black history game.
I totally agree. Zella, let me bring you back into the to the conversation because we're almost out of time. What is the one thing that's top of your mind that Black folks should know about Black history? What is the number one thing that you think that we should know?
That we're always
about our own history.
That, you know, Black history is celebrated every day. We don't have to go too far to find out about, you know, who has done major, who has given major contributions to the work, to moving our people ahead. And, you know, a lot of the, you know, what Dr. Adderly was talking about, we really need to go back in time and really look at, you know, who these people were, because they were saying the same things that many activists are saying today, you know,
right
and
now. Yeah, today.
Yeah. And, you know, I would also really, you know, encourage people to sit down with their grandparents, to sit down with their elders and record them. We have technology. It's fine. You know, we need to record it because we don't want things to go to the grave.
Right. Absolutely. Dr. Adderly, what is your number one thing that we should know about Black history as we wrap?
Number one thing, know more about Africa. We are descended not from slaves, we're descended from African. And our global Black struggles are connected. You know, civil rights activists knew this. They were bringing activists into their campuses to talk about what civil rights struggles here had to do with fighting apartheid, to fighting colonialism. Anderson at Emory, who she's written about this, like the NAACP.
Yeah, one thing that you can't
last minute to do their class.
To
Africa.
Sorry. I'm sorry. We're just having some technical difficulties. So you froze there. So I just want you to complete the last thing that you said there. Last 30 seconds.
I said if I have to sub for any class, I always just go in and talk about Africa.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because we definitely need to know more about our continent. Right. So I want to say thank you so much, ladies. I really, really appreciate it. Zella, again, thank you for sharing your son's birthday with us and coming on and dropping knowledge. Dr. Adderly, I definitely have to have you back on because you are a wealth of information and we want to fix our technical issues here and make sure we can hear every single word that you say. Again, thank you so much for being here. I also want to say thank you so much to the Seattle Urban League for making this possible, Black History Month celebration on Rainier Avenue Radio. And up next, we're going to listen to some jazz. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Want more Tina Marie? Follow her on Facebook
Bye-bye.
at Tina on Tap or Instagram at Tina Marie Tyler _.
What's my name, Sam? Right.